Yeah, I don't care if it's 9-7. I'm still going all in. What's up, YouTube? It's the NBA betting market video for January the 20th. In fact, I will start off with the Nets Cavaliers game. 907 bets so far in this one. 7 p.m. Eastern time start. The very popular Brooklyn Nets are 9.5-point favorites at open. They've been bet up to 10-point favorites with juice on that 10. 61% of bettors, 87% of the money has helped push this up. And also, we'll talk about the money line. Nets open minus 504, currently minus 503, 49% of bets, and 98% of the money on the Nets. So a ton of exposure on the Nets here for the books.
Well, this is interesting. I like we haven't been making inferences, but let's be honest here. Like, Cavs plus 10 are at even money. That looks pretty interesting to me because let's not is this the first game where they're going to have all three guys? The big three, perhaps?
I like the reference. I'm not sure if Kyrie Irving's back or not. I know he had an interview or something like that. The juice has actually gotten better for the Cavaliers.
Plus money?
It's currently plus 103. Sorry, I'm just entering in some information here. Yeah, back onto this market, fat guy.
Wow. So my thing is, this is the Nets have to be the squarest of square teams. You have prolific scorers on the team. People are going to bet it. Here's the most indicating thing about how square it is. If that 98% money figure is true on the money line, which I will admit is dubious, that's got to be parlay tickets. Squares aren't betting $5 to win $1, you know what I mean? Or in their case, 50 to win 10, right? That's just not really a thing. So this has got to be money line parlay tickets because where else are they getting this? And the other thing too is the line. It actually improved on the money line. So that makes me think that 98% of money is a really small total, really small amount. And the Cavaliers probably have they have exposure on the Nets, but the people betting the Cavs, it's probably 3 or 4 people, you know what I mean? Whereas the Nets probably are loaded in terms of, I guess the money percentage is higher. Either way, I think that this is mostly parlay money, and it'd be hard not to like the Cavaliers here. I know I don't like to put a gold seal of stamp, but as far as standard practices, this is very interesting for a Cavaliers wager. 10 plus 103. This is the best part about that updated juice that Big Rye had mentioned. Your break-even win rate on plus 103 is 48.5%. If you're right half the time, you're making money. And you're doing quite well, right? So can the question is, can the Cavaliers more than half the time or better, over a simulated game in this spot against the Nets, can they win? Cover the 10-point spread? So I don't know. If it were me, which it very likely could be, this would be a Cavaliers play. I know we don't give endorsements; it's a market video, but this is staggering to me. It really is. I want to see how the market closes because it isn't due for 4 p.m., 7 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah.
So 4 p.m. Pacific. So we still got 5 hours. A lot of stuff can change, but at the moment, the price on the Cavs looks quite attractive.
And the thing too with this game is that there's no reason that they can't bump this line up to Nets minus 16.5 and then get even money on both sides.
Yeah.
That might be a little bit higher than
Maybe 13.5.
Yeah. But the Nets could be minus 800, minus 900 favorites, and they could get the 90-10 split. So it's one of those things where the books choose to set this line where they have, and the line actually hasn't moved that much considering how much money is on the Nets, both on the money line and against the spread.
Sorry we're going long, but I got to add one more thing. Like Big Ride mentioned, you think the book doesn't know when they're opening this price? It's just this is classic pros versus Joes, and I know where I'm going to align with.
The OU for this game, it opened 224. It's been bet up to 225.5. 79% of bettors are on the over. However, 96% of the money on the under, despite that line moving up 1.5 points.
I bet you that came in at the 225.5 number. Those are kind of key-ish numbers, and I would imagine that that the money came slamming down once they moved the line, because there was probably early moves on the early bets, and then what happens is it's called a resistance point. It's a thing in trading too, like stock trading or what have you, commodity trading. As soon as it gets to a certain price, that's where all all the buy orders for the pros are, and that's my guess. My speculation about it is that they probably like the number 225.5, and they probably slammed it, and you might see it come back down again, I would imagine.
Next up, we have the Mavericks-Pacers game. 1,021 bets so far. The Pacers opened as 1-point favorites at -105. However, that line has shifted for the Mavericks as road favorites at -1.5, -105. 60% of bettors and 95% of the money has been put on the Mavericks against the spread. However, on the money line, 91% of the money is on the Pacers. So interesting to note here that the money against the spread helped push the line towards the Mavericks. But there is a lot of buyback, it looks like, on the Pacers money line.
This is so weird to me because I can't decipher what Pro and Joe money would be necessarily, because realistically, if you're betting this game, you probably want the Mavericks against the spread if you like the Mavericks, and you probably want the Pacers money line, I would deduce, right? But maybe there's a conflicting thing here. Maybe there is EV on both in some weird, bizarre world because of how close a game it is. Maybe these are both half-point favorites, right? Except you're going to get plus juice with the Pacers, and well, maybe Mavericks are true, like 1-point favorites. Either way, there's a big discrepancy on money on both, and I don't think the book cares because it looks like they're probably balanced, considering we don't know the total handle of the spread market and the money line market.
Yeah, it looks pretty balanced to me. The other thing that's interesting is that you could have got the Mavericks at even money on the money line, and now you could get the Pacers at +105. So there was the opportunity to middle this game.
Free roll.
Yeah. So if anyone got that, congratulations, guys. That's one of the benefits of taking early lines, especially when you're on the right side of a line movement, is that you can arbitrage and make some money.
Hold up here, Big Rye. What if they got Mavericks +1 and at -105? So I guess they could have done it. So I mean, Big Rye might have unearthed something I just didn't realize. Is these could be two sides middling each other. It's like guys could be on the early Mavericks and closing Pacers. Like that's very possible. So maybe they pulled a middle off on the book. Very interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff.
And then the OU opened 217.5, bet up to 219.5. So it went up 2 points. 63% of bettors are on the over, and the money is split 50-50.
Yeah, it's perhaps the early movement to the over is because of 63% of people. Perhaps they bet more money at the time, but then perhaps the more money came in after at 219.5, and perhaps there's a really bad number for Las Vegas. Could be well, we call it Vegas, the sports books, could be 218 or 219. That's what I would deduce from that.
On to the next game, a Celtics 76ers game. 870 bets so far. Sixers opened as 5-point favorites, still 5-point favorites. 30% of bettors are on the Sixers. However, 73% of the money is on the Sixers, and that line hasn't moved. Let's take a look at the money line, which opened -186. It's been bet up to -191. 70% of bettors and 90% of the money is on the Sixers money line. So interesting to note here, 870 bets, 73% of the money is on the Sixers against the spread. 90% of the money is on the Sixers money line. But these lines haven't moved very much considering how much exposure is on the Sixers.
I think Toto is the bookmaker here. He's definitely holding the line. Now Celtics +5 -110. Like you're pretty de-incentivized to take the Celtics at that juice, considering standards -105. Break-even win rate is now up to 52.38 or whatever at -110. Whereas break-even win rate for a Sixers bet is just 50%. So there is a significant difference here. Although I will advocate, if you do take the Celtics, there is 2 routes to go. The less variance, less paying out route of taking the Celtics +5, in addition to a positive line movement for a larger payout on the Celtics. Really menial, though, probably It would be 1.6, about a little over 2% of a move between 1.66 and plus 170. So I mean, it is a little bit extra value, I feel, if you take them on the money line. It's just that is that extra value worth the variance? That's up to you, right?
Well, Fat Guy, I'm going to give you a little bit of a wink and agree with you that there is some value on the Celtics money line. On to the OU, 220.5 has been bet up to 221. 72% of bettors, 54% of the money is on the over, helping push it up half a point, even though the juice is on the under 221 at minus 109, which suggests that this might not be much of a move at all.
It could even be a reverse line movement, Big Rye. That's always that possibility as well, right? Like really close, though. It would be really close. Again, I say this every day, knowing the value of a point, knowing the value of a half point in this instance.
On to the Pistons-Hawks game, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time start. 945 bets. The Hawks opened as 6-point favorites, but they've been bet down to 4.5-point favorites. 57% of bettors are on the Hawks. Only 17% of the money on the Hawks, so that Pistons against the spread money has helped push that line down 1.5 points. Let's take a look at the money line as well. Pistons open it as 2-1 dogs at plus 211. They've been bet down to plus 160. Despite receiving they have received 54% of bets, 54% of the money. So the book's taking exposure on the Pistons against the spread and on the money line, and they've adjusted the line quite a bit because 211 to plus 160 is massive. Is a pretty big move.
Massive, pretty big. It's massive. So you got to think, if you like the Pistons in this game, because you're never betting a team, you're betting price. I think you missed the boat. I think it's fair to say, right? However, though, it's one of those. It's how a market works. Because there was low demand and low expectations for the Pistons. That skyrocketed with mostly sharp money would be my guess. When is their buyback? Like, when has the chasm been crossed and it's too far? Like, this could be equilibrium where the line should be? That's possible, right? But did it boil over, and is there value on the Hawks? That's really the only question you can ask yourself. Because the Pistons, it's not like the line is going to creep back up to plus 211. Where if it does something like that, the books will certainly take a loss. So you have to think to yourselves, you can't really bet the Pistons. I mean, at a plus EV clip, I would imagine your idea would have to be the Hawks. But is this the right price? What are the value of those points?
And then the OU opened at 221. It's been bet down half a point to 220.5. 54% of bettors, 57% of the money is on the over, despite that total moving down half a point.
I guess this could be a reverse line movement. Technically it is, but who knows when that money came in, and it's pretty close, so it's not like it's not like
a home run. It's
not a home run.
It's technically a reverse line move, but 54. Like, this is one of those ones where it really doesn't matter which side hits. The books are going to make their money either way because the bet percentages and the money percentages are so even. Next up, we have the Heat-Raptors game. Only 605 bets on this game so far. Raptors, who I believe have been the worst team against the spread, opened at minus 3.5. They've been bet up to minus 4, minus 106. 63% of bettors and 48% of the money has in place on the Raptors against the spread. Conversely, on the money line, Heat open plus 156, bet down to plus 154. 21% of bettors and 77% of the money is on the Heat. So the books taking a little bit of exposure here on the Heat, especially on the money line, because 77% of the money needs to get paid out plus 150. That's not going to be good for the books.
No, but I do, like, if I were picking this, I'd have to check when these lines came out, because if they came out at the same time, this is massive value for the Raptors on the money line, right? Just because of incongruency. But again, you have to check when they come out, right? Because if the Raptors have now got a better price on the money line but worse on the spread, you know which one you're going to take, right? Like, you're going to take the lower payout, lower variance route in the money line. But Big Ride, could you fill me in?
Yeah, I'm going to interject because this is actually quite interesting. That spread line came out at 6:05 p.m. on the 19th, and the money line didn't get released until the 20th at 10:11 a.m. So these lines weren't even close to coming out at the same time. It's actually the biggest discrepancy I've ever seen in lines coming out as far as a money line versus a spread. So
can you check real quick, what was the corresponding spread at that time for the ATS or when the spread came out?
10, 11. It was roughly -4, -108. So you can see that line.
So that makes sense then. See what I mean? So now what we're talking about, remember I say we're learning the value of a point, right? So now we know that more than likely -4, -108 equates to -175 on the money line, and the 2 points of juice you lose from -4, -108 to -4, -106, or is equal roughly to 3 points on a money line from -175 to 172. Now I preach this all the time. Again, you're going to have to do your own math because, like I said, we can't spoon feed everything. But this is value of a point. It's interesting, is it not? We get to know what these mean and if they're congruent. And again, this is an assumption, but that's why you don't just look at this Heat Raptors game as the only barometer. You check the other games and the other information to figure out what is the value of a point, because you're going to know more often than not. It is, I will be honest, it is sometimes tied in conjunction with OU.
The OU open 222, still at 222. The juice has moved slightly in favor of the under. 83% of bettors have placed bets on the over. However, 97% of the money that has come in on the under.
Lowest volume, 605 bets. So I'm not really sure how to take this. I feel that it's not actually a lot of pool. It's not a large pool of money. That'd be my guess. I mean, because it's only moved 3 points of juice from 222 -103 to -106. That's not significant. That signals to me that the handle is quite low on the OU.
And then on to the Magic Timberwolves game. 718 bets so far. The Magic open as 3-point favorites on the road. They've been bet up to 4-point favorites at -107. 62% of bettors, 97% of the money has helped move that line and juice up slightly for the Magic. And then the money line, it looks pretty congruent, -157 to -177. 87% of bets on the money line, but we don't have the money percentages for this Magic Timberwolves game.
No, we do not. I think it would be safe to assume that they probably have exposure on the Magic. You could posit that maybe there's a ton of money on the on the money line, because the spread market only moved not even a full point, right? So because you're still in, I guess it moved more than a full point, rather a point and some change. So I mean, considering drastic moves in other markets that we've seen, it's possible that the T-Wolves have, I don't know, maybe 30% of the money or something, like way more than the volume. But again, this is all theory. My speculation is that they are taking some exposure on the Magic between the two markets.
And then the OU open 217. It's been bet up to 219. 49% of bettors and 49% of the money is on the over.
Yeah, that tends to be the case. Maybe there's some buyback here at 219. -107, which is probably contributed to late money percentages. So that's always a possibility. It doesn't look like there's anything super interesting in that market that I can put a finger on.
680 bets in Suns Rockets. Suns opened as 6-point favorites. They've been bet down to 5.5-point favorites, still with slight juice on the Suns, though, at -5.5 at -107. 57% of bettors, 84% of the money is on the Suns. So interesting to note that despite the Suns receiving more bets and more money, the spread has moved against them. That could be because of the money line, but unfortunately we don't have all the information on the money line. It says 85% of bets, but if this was congruent with a lot of other markets, there's probably at least more than 40% of the money on the
40-50%
money line.
on the Rockets money line, yeah. Which that almost indicates sharp action, though, taking the Rockets at, because think about this way too, like I always I call it the getting in the mind of a square, and like the Rockets just lost their star, so unless you believe in Ewing theory, it's not exactly a popular.
They've also been one of the worst teams against the spread as well with the Rockets.
So who likes bad news?
The Raptors. We do. So, I mean, I'm not saying we're the sharpest of knives in the drawer, but we tend to think a little bit outside of the box.
And I would imagine, again, we're going to be a little bit more aggressive in some of these things because we're starting to piece things together. I would imagine that there probably is value on the Rockets. It depends where the money line came out, but probably on the money line more so than anything else at plus 189. But we got to know the value here. You got to remember the variance is a lot higher. You're going to lose a lot more bets betting on the Rockets money line than you will against the spread. But there's a reasonable chance from, at least I'm inferring, that you'll make the same amount of money, if not more, right? So you're almost certainly almost not going to lose less. So variance is the root. And the thing is, if you're betting on these games and you're an emotional gambler, sorry, I have to interject with some advice. You can't just chalk it up. Oh, I should have done this. I should have done that. It's an EV calculation at the end of the day. It makes no difference. Okay. Just because you're using the one sample, think about it this way. In your lifetime, say you're 20 years old, you might make between sports bet, you might make 100,000 bets. Let's call it, you bet all the time. Okay. Is this one decision in the basket of decisions going to make a difference? No, it's the expected value over the long term. And if you have an extra 0.5% or percent, that compounds too. Because don't forget, if you do this really, if you do this conservatively and you do this and you bet properly and you build your bankroll, that 0.5% is compounded over time because your unit sizing will eventually get larger and larger and larger, and that 0.5% has just worked for you 100 times over. So I know this is a little bit of a segue, but I have to explain the difference between, maybe there's more of a risk on the Rockets money line, but more than likely that you're probably getting a slightly better percentage.
And then the OU for this game opened 219. It's been bet down to 218.5. Still with heavy juice on the over, though, at minus 111. 67% of bettors on the over. However, 57% of the money is on the under.
Yeah. And then they have moved the line, but did they? Do you know what I mean? Like, is that a line movement, or is this just one of those things I guess let's give it a term. Let's call it price smoke. You know what I mean? Like, there's some, like it's a smoke screen of pricing. We haven't quite figured it out, but this feels like, maybe this is even a reverse line movement too. Like, you're getting a worse deal on the over, even though you're gaining a 0.5 point. That's 6 points of juice. Oh, that's the thing. Going back to the Rockets money line as well. Know the value of a point. You can answer this question yourself.
On to the Kings Clippers, a 10 p.m. Eastern time start. We have 3 10 p.m. Eastern time start games tonight, so all 3 of these games will probably have a healthy amount of bets. Kings Clippers right now. Clippers open 10.5. They've been bet down to 9.5 with juice still on them at minus 108. 60% of bettors and 47% of the money. So it's interesting to note that the line moved in favor of the Clippers despite bet and money percentages being so even. Even more interesting, though, is this money line because they open at minus 575, bet down to minus 467, despite receiving 58% of bets and 93% of the money. Very interesting line move, fat guy.
It's unbelievable. And, like, look how... Sorry, this is just bizarre. Like, 575 to 467. I mean... And then the Kings, 455 to 381. So, again, if it were me, we'd have to line it up minute for minute. But you're probably getting a better price at Kings plus 9.5 minus 102 than you are at Kings plus 381, right? So that's probably a better play. And that is just an astounding, because this shows you that they don't want you to really bet the Kings. You know what I mean, to win this game? Because 455 tells me that that was an inflated price, right? So maybe you can line up, like, this is another thing too, is you can line up the times of when these happen, and you can kind of figure out like where it's off, where the market isn't congruent. So right now, if you were to bet a team, I would imagine that the team that they have the less exposure, the team that that is contrary to the exposure they're taking, is the Kings, and it also has more dollar per person as well. For 53, they actually have more money on the spread, but there's so many. Like, think about it. I'm guessing that these money line Clippers ones are parlay tickets. Yeah. So there's so much, like, if there's parlay tickets, you just want to be against whatever side they're on. I'm just telling you that right now. It's the way to go. Go ahead.
No, you finish up.
If you were to make a selection, I would imagine it's the Kings against the spread is what I would say.
I would tend to agree, fat guy. The
Yeah.
OU opened at 232. It's been bet down to 230. 69% of bettors are on the over. However, 58% of the money on the under, helping push that line down 2 points.
Yeah, that makes sense. Pretty lateral stuff. We haven't seen any radical stuff in the OU. Part of it though is it doesn't have a duality market like the money line and the spread does, which really tells you a really interesting story. But on to the next one.
Next up is the Grizzlies Trailblazers, 756 bets so far. We have the Blazers, who opened as 1.5-point favorites at home. They've been bet down to +1 underdogs at home. 48% of bettors, 44% of the money is on the Blazers. Interesting to note on the money line, Blazers open -114. They've been bet down to a pick'em despite receiving 24% of bets and 86% of the money. So that's a very, very interesting move on the money line for the Grizzlies.
Well, that's my guess is 86% of the money came in at what, -105 or better, I would imagine. Meaning there's still, possibly it might have just come in at the even money number. I would imagine that Blazers even money is probably a plus EV bet. They're probably better than 50% to win this game. Of course, that's not what the current money line or a current ATS would tell you, but obviously it is close. Very interesting stuff. It looks like they're taking exposure on the Blazers, but it's such a tight one of when this money came in exactly. So that's one of the other things that you will struggle with is when did this money come in, right? So again, we can only speculate. So I'm just saying the most interesting number to me on there is Trailblazers at even money, but that's more of a speculation than any other ones that I've mentioned.
The OU for this game opened 221.5. It's been bet up to 223. 76% of bettors have helped push this line up 1.5 points, and the money is split 50-50.
I would imagine that the early money and the early bets were on the over. They shifted the line upwards. They got resistance, and then more money came in on the under, as it tends to be the thing, because perhaps they're opening the opening line at like closer to equilibrium, and then people are just betting it up because over tends to be the more bet on thing, as we have noticed in just about even look at this screen. It's 4 out of the 5 have more volume on the over, and the other one is about even at 59%. So that'll give you a good indicator. So basically they're waiting. My guess, this is another speculation. Like I said, we don't know for sure. We're just guessing the psychology of the two sides, the pros and the Joes. And I guess we're the neutrals in this equation. But the pros are waiting for that line to get inflated until the resistance number they already have pre laid out. And then they just buy back on it. And then the market kind of sits where it needs to be. Because maybe the true equilibrium on this game for the OU should be like 220.5 or 220 or 219.5, really. So there was value on the pros, but there's considerably more value at 221.5, but there's considerably more value at 223.
On to the final game of the night, Spurs Warriors, 1,021 bets. Warriors just coming off a nice win against the Lakers. The Warriors opened as 1-point favorites. They still are 1-point favorites. The juices favor them slightly to -107. They have received 64% of the bets against the spread, but only 5% of the money. And then it's interesting to note the money line, Warriors open -110, bet up to -114. Only 8% of the bets on the money line, but 91% of the money. So this is another one of those conflicting markets where there's a lot of money on the Spurs against the spread, a lot of money on the Warriors on the money line. What do we make of this?
Well, let's be honest here. You just nailed it. Who's probably the most heralded team in the league? We're speculating, of course, but probably LeBron James and the Lakers. They lost on prime television, probably the most watched game of the last week, I would imagine, against the formerly glorious Warriors. So the Warriors are gonna carry a lot of clout into this game, I would imagine. I don't know about the Spurs' recent success or lack thereof, but it's going to be definitely trumped by a primetime victory as an underdog by the Warriors, gaining the sentiment of the public, which would mean that there's usually converse value on the Spurs. Further illustrating and strengthening my point is all the Warriors' money is on the money line, which I would imagine probably has something to do with a parlay, because they like betting teams to win a lot of the time, right? Or, teams that they think are better, right? So there is a possibility. Again, this is just a theory posited. It is pure speculation, but we'll call it an educated experience guess that there is parlay money on the Warriors here and the Spurs, for instance, that against the spread. That seems like a more of a pro move than anything. Maybe they like that extra point at minus 103. They like that instead of the money line, because the money line was still minus 101, right? So perhaps they probably, I don't know when that came. Like, it's 2 points of juice. Is that worth that 1 point push? It might very well be. So that'll give you another insight. Knowing the value of a point, it's more important than the teams themselves.
And then the OU open 228, still at 228. The juices moved in favor of the over from minus 102 to minus 106. 57% of bettors and 52% of the money has helped push that juice up 4 points on the over.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's pretty standard here, though, I think. I feel like this OU market has a little bit more meat than the other ones, I got to be honest, because 54% discrepancy pushing it up 4 points. That speaks to me a little bit more, and that makes me think that this market is a little bit more robust. But again, nothing interesting of note as far as wagering considerations, in my opinion.
And that's it for the January 20th NBA betting market video. Thank you guys for watching, and good luck with your January 20th wagers in the NBA.